Hello everyone, welcome back to the Showing Up to Your Life podcast and YouTube video. My name is Art Burns. So yesterday I talked about the importance or the value in seeing life as this process that that our moment to moment experiences, right, are this process of events that and experiences and even a phenomenon, you could say, that just arises, it exists for a time, and then it passes, right? And seeing life in this way, does a couple of really important things, as I talked about yesterday. First of all, what it helps, it encourages us to be not so identified with our experiences, right? We don't feel like so entangled with them, right? We feel like we're kind of looking at what's happening to us as from a couple of steps away, which helps us to not again not be so identified and entangled with them, right? And another really important and very valuable thing that happens here is that this encourages a level of presence, right? It encourages us to see that there's an impermanence here, and in that impermanence we allow ourselves then to accept what is happening in this present moment, right? And that allows us to really truly be present without aversion and grasping to the various things that are arising in our lives, right? But there's something else I didn't talk about yesterday that I wanted to cover today, okay? And that is how this sort of the ability, and again, this is something that can be done with practice, right? Everything I talk about on this podcast is, and in this YouTube video, everything that I talk about is something that it's a skill that you can build through practice. Okay, so a lot of these things do not come naturally for everyone, right? They come naturally for some people, not for everyone. But everything that I talk about here, there's no magic here. There's no kind of initiation kind of thing that needs to happen to attain these abilities and this sort of the concepts and the abilities that I talk about here, right? It is so simple that it just comes from practice, right? And that's all it is. It's just devoting yourself and committing to a daily practice. My son yesterday, right, he picked up his guitar. I bought him a guitar like a year ago, and he just didn't take to it very well. And then yesterday he picked it up, and I showed him like this little thing to do on his guitar. Very, very simple thing to just get his fingers moving, and in the space of like the couple of hours between the time he first picked it up to the time that, he wasn't practicing for 2 hours straight, but across the couple hours he would pick it up, try it, and even by the end of the day he was getting better at it, right? And I told him, I said, dude, all you have to do is commit to 10 minutes a day, right? If you could commit to 10 minutes a day to do anything, right? Whether that's learn how to play guitar, learn how to do meditation, learn how to live with mindfulness and being in the present moment, or losing, doing some sort of exercise routine, or practicing penmanship, or anything that you're looking to do, right? If you commit to 10 minutes a day, it's only a matter of time before you develop that skill, right? And it really is that simple. And this work is no different. And the reason why, people kind of separate this work, the work that I talk about here, right, mindfulness and all the beautiful benefits that we can get from mindfulness. The reason why people separate this from something like, learning how to play guitar, or learning how to knit, or learning how to play a video game, or whatever it is, right, is that there's an emotional construct or content. There's an emotional aspect to what we're talking about with mindfulness, right? Because our emotions are what does the clinging and the aversion. Our emotions are what kind of gets us to be identified with our experiences as they're happening, and our emotions are what makes it very, very difficult to kind of let go of things, right? And to just allow yourself to be here now, right? And it's that emotional fear or the emotion of fear, right, that prevents people from doing this work, right? But really, folks, I'm telling you, 10 minutes a day, like that should be your target. And you can start off even slower than that, right? In fact, what I usually recommend is you start out, you might do 10 minutes a day, but do it 2 minutes at a time. right? So in the morning, just, while you're having your cup of coffee, just sit and be with yourself for 2 minutes. And then, just before you get out of your car at work or whatever, before you get, in the lobby of the building where you work, right? Just take another 2 minutes, right? Then 2 minutes at lunch, 2 minutes when you come home, 2 minutes just before bedtime, and there you have it. You've done 10 minutes a day, right? And so if you can do that on a daily basis, you're talking about just a few weeks before you start to get really good at it, right? Just like playing guitar, just like playing a video game, just like knitting, just like riding a bike, just like anything that you've ever practiced in your life before. It's that simple, folks. It really is, and it's that straightforward, right? But again, the reason why it seems difficult, and it can be difficult. That does not mean that it's not simple, right? And this is something that John Kabat-Zinn says in a few of his books. That it's simple but not easy, right? But committing, and that's why to simplify it as far as you can, and to kind of do the practice in spite of whatever emotions you're feeling, and just kind of commit again to doing the practice, and everything else starts to fall in place, especially if you have a coach like me who is helping you to kind of put it all into context, whether it's through these videos or actually working one-on-one with each other, right? And so that said, I want to go into, again, one of the really important aspects of the, or one of the really huge benefits of the ability to see our experiences in our lives as moment-to-moment experiences that arise, they exist for a time, and then they go, right? They pass, right? When we can do that, right? So much of our life is spent, kind of worrying about what's going to happen next, right? Or ruminating about what happened before, right? And what happens with, and again, if you're feeling, resonance with this, believe me, you are not alone, okay? This is just about every human being on earth is subject to this on some level, right? And it's this idea that, and this is again where we're seeing the experiences as something, it's just a phenomenon, right? That it arises, it exists, and then it passes. When we do that, we start to release our grip on the worry about what's coming next, right? Or the regret about what happened before, right? But here's the thing. When we engage in that clinging and the aversion, right? Or like, again, like worrying about what's coming next, right? That usually involves either a clinging that, okay, I don't want this to end. I want this to keep going. So what's the next thing? How am I going to have to defend and cling to this thing even harder so it doesn't go away, right? And then, of course, aversion is like, okay, I don't want that thing to happen, right? I'm like really not looking forward to doing holiday shopping, or I'm really not looking forward to, taking a trip to the family, or whatever it is, right? None of those are my issues, but those might be things coming up for you right now in the holiday season, right? Or maybe it's the Christmas parties at work, or maybe it's the money issue of spending money for Christmas gifts and things like this, right? So when we, again, that's something that we're putting ourselves in the future. We're worrying about a problem that doesn't exist right now, right? That problem is a potential problem in the future, right? And right here, right now, that problem is not a thing yet. It's only a thing because we're making it a thing, right? And that's through our thoughts and our emotions, right? Because as soon as we have that thought about that thing that we don't want to happen, then we're going to have an emotional response to that. And that emotional response is where we feel it. That brings a physical sensation that's really hard to ignore, right? And it's really hard to move past, right? And so many of us have spent so long, again, I talk about this a lot, right? Like I'm saying, practice 10 minutes a day doing this, but really, it's very accurate to say that you have been practicing every day, all day, doing that, right? Like kind of clinging and aversion and worrying about the future and regretting the past. Like every time you engage in doing that, right, you are practicing it. And you are making it something that your body expects, and your body, almost wants to happen, even if it's uncomfortable. Your body starts to crave it because it is what it expects, right? And your body is always, and your brain, your physical brain, and the rest of your body are always going to move towards the familiar. Always. Even if the familiar is very uncomfortable. Okay, and that's just a psychological fact. Okay, and so again, the idea then is that if we can practice sort of disidentifying with the experiences that are happening, right, and kind of appreciating the impermanence of what's happening as it's happening, right, because that is the reality, right? Even our emotions, as I said yesterday, our emotions themselves will only last if we don't feed them with thoughts and concerns and things like this, and interactions with others. If we don't feed the emotions, they'll only be there for 90 seconds. Right? So it's like, one of my teachers once said, it's kind of like, when you go to the gym and you work out for the first time in a long time, right? Your muscles are very sore, right? But you don't then go into some kind of like, encompassing and consuming funk about the fact that you're sore, right? You say, I'm sore now. I do what I can to relieve my soreness, but I know that it'll go away. So I'm not gonna go into some severe depression about the fact that I have sore muscles today, right? And what my teacher says, you could just go get ice cream and just know that it will pass, right? And so the same thing is true with our emotions, right? When we feel an emotion, we can understand and appreciate the fact that it will pass if we don't keep feeding that emotion with further thoughts and further actions that are going to cement it and really renew it and renew it and renew it and keep the emotion coming back and back and back, right? If we just leave it alone, just like our sore muscles after a gym workout, right? If we just leave the emotion where it is, we can just go get ice cream and it'll go away. Right? And so and the way to do that is, like I was saying yesterday, or one of the main ways to do that is to recognize that impermanence, right? And that impermanence is manifest in the reality that the experiences that we have, and this is outside experiences as well as internal experiences including your thoughts, your emotions, your sensations, and all of the different patterns and implicit biases and implicit memories and tendencies that you have, all of that stuff, right? It arises, it exists for a time, and then it passes, right? And if we can practice recognizing things in that way, right, then what we do is we become so familiar. Remember, there's that word again, right? Through the practice, we become so familiar with the impermanence of all of these things that are happening that we automatically now just let it go. We just look at it with, and this is where I talk about curiosity a lot, right? Because when we can disassociate ourselves with the emotions and with the experiences and with the thoughts and with the actions of others and such, right? When we can identify with that, then what we can do is we can be curious about it, right? We can look at ourselves and say, isn't that interesting how I'm having this emotion that just came from out of nowhere? Isn't that interesting how I am having these kind of thoughts going on right now, right? And at any given time, once you have that disidentification with it, right, now you can look at it in that way, and at any given time that you find yourself having those thoughts, those emotions, those sensations in your body, or saying things and doing things that are not serving you, you can always just pause and breathe into your body and just ground yourself in this moment, which again is the only moment we ever have, right? So when we do this, right, because what happens is when we get so identified with the things that are happening in our lives, right, again, whether it's internally or externally, when we get identified with it, right, what we do is we kind of put our attention in that thing, right? And once our attention is in that thing, now we're no longer really in control, right? Like that's kind of how it works, right? Like the minute you kind of, you say like, okay, this thing is happening and it cannot happen for me. I cannot allow this to happen, right? Now what you've done is you're not letting it be impermanent. You're creating more permanence of it. right? And while you're creating more impermanence of it, you're allowing it to now you're very much identified with it, right? Now it is you. You are it. And when you're in that place, right? Now you're in what we would call a me-centered universe, right? And this is really, really important, okay? Because we all have our view of what's happening in the world. And it's natural to be in this me-centered universe to a certain degree, right? It's very natural to think like, okay, what's going on with me right now? Because even though we are a collective consciousness, and even though we live in families and we live among groups of friends, and we have jobs that put us in teams of other people, even though we are very connected to others, we still are very much individuals, right? As far as our egoic identification, right? So the minute we start to kind of kind of identify with the thoughts that we're having, with the emotions that we're having, with our desires, with our aversions, with our fears, when we identify with those things very strongly, it's like we put on blinders, right? And all we can see at that point is those things, right? Like we can only see my fears, my desire, my needs. I can only see that. And what that does, right, is that takes away a very crucial aspect of being a human, right? And certainly a very, very crucial aspect of emotional intelligence, right? And what I'm talking about here is empathy. Right? When we over-identify with our experiences and we fail to see our experiences as just a phenomenon that just arises, exists for a time, and then passes, when we fail to see it that way, right, or we refuse to see it that way more accurately, then what we're doing is we become over-identified in whatever's happening to us internally or externally, and then we take away the ability to see things from another's point of view. Right? When we're so wrapped up in our own physical sensations, again in an identified way, not as a sort of not a disidentified consciousness, but as a all-consuming kind of identification, right? Like, oh, my life is so hard, I can't, it's like this thing's happening in my life and it's freaking me out and I don't know how to deal with it. And when we get into that kind of thing, right, now we can't feel another, right? And what happens then, right, is that because remember, right, yes, we are individuals in a certain way, but we are very much connected to everybody, and that connection is very necessary, right? No person can live in solitary confinement for very long, right? Of course, we do that we horribly treat prisoners that way, and we damage them in great extents, right? So we are meant to coordinate with each other, right? And that's what life is, right? Whether you have friends, you have a spouse or a partner, you have children, you have business partners, you have, neighbors, you have, countrymen, statesmen, whatever it is, right? You are part of a collective. Right? And if we close ourselves off and only allow ourselves to be the individual ego, and we ignore this connection that we have with others, right? Like, okay, you can try to live that way, you're not going to be happy, I'll tell you that. First off, you are going to experience some, psychological and emotional challenges that come with that type of life. But more importantly, right, is the fact that you physically, right, logistically, we can't exist that way completely. I mean, I guess if you're some kind of billionaire or something and you can have, like Howard Hughes style, right, where you can have a staff of people just doing stuff for you so you never have to, interact with people. You maybe have one person you talk to. I think that's how Howard Hughes did it. Like, he had one person he talked to, and that person talked to everybody else in the world, And so I guess theoretically you could live that way, but the problem is that we don't live that way, right? We're not all Howard Hughes. We don't all have millions and billions of dollars to live in this kind of reclusive way, right? And but unfortunately, most of us are behaving emotionally as though we do, right? Because we're not allowing ourselves to feel the empathy for each other, right? And so what happens then, right, is your colleague, your spouse, your child, your friend, your pet, your neighbors, whoever it is, right? People, life, as represented by people in your life, are always going to be reaching out to interact with you, right? That's why we call this podcast and this YouTube channel Showing Up for Life, right? Because that's how life is, right? It reaches out and it requires of us, it demands of us an interaction, right? Now, again, whether that's something as simple as talking to somebody at the bank, or something as complex as being present with a young child, right? If we are, if we're so wrapped up in our own stuff, right, that identified, looking at like what's going to happen next week and worrying about it so much that we can't be right here right now, right? When we do that, we're not available to feel what another person is feeling, or not even, like I said, it's even animals, right? And that's the thing, right? If we are going to show up for life, if life is going to reach out to interact with us and to demand our participation, then it requires empathy, right? We need to feel that for each other, or else, I just had a very, kind of, I'll be honest with you, it was a very difficult conversation with my wife. Look, we're here in a pandemic with 2 young children. It's been really, really hard, and it's easy for me to kind of think about and talk about how hard it is for me. Right? Like, I have to work all day. I also have to feed the children. My wife is out doing her job, so she gets to talk to adults all day and stuff like that, and it's very easy for me to get consumed by how hard it is for me, right? And when I do that, it's not that it's unfair. I mean, it's realistic, right? I mean, I'm very mindful and very present with the difficulties that I'm having, and I have them in a very proper perspective, and it is still very hard, right? Like, it's not like I'm making it up. I mean, this is a global pandemic, there's financial difficulty, there's social difficulty, there's romantic difficulty, there's physical difficulty, there's emotion, there's all kinds of stuff that's going on right now, right? So it is hard. But when I focus on how hard it is for me, right, when I identify with the difficulty that I'm having, and then I try to talk to my wife about it, well, I then fail to see how difficult it is for her, which it is. Again, it's so easy for me to say, well, you get to go out and talk to adults all day, and I'm just stuck here with my videos and my kids, and it's really hard, right? But from her standpoint, she's got her own stresses involved with working so much. She's got her own pressure, thinking like, well, I'm the one carrying this family. She's got her own, exhaustion issues because she's not sleeping well because of the pressure that I'm feeling too. And so the point that I'm making is that if I fail to see how hard it is for her, well, then there's no way that we can actually connect to each other. Right? And then we just become 2 individuals who kind of, interrupt each other's orbit here and there. And what happens then is that you start feeling like, okay, what's wrong? Something's wrong. I don't feel the love connection that I have with you. Well, of course you don't feel it because I'm hurting. And this is my wife. I'm hurting. I need some support here, But again, if I'm so wrapped up with how hard it is for me, then how can I possibly support her? How can I even know that she needs the support? Right? So that's another benefit to the ability to practicing and gaining the ability and the skill to be present and to see each each experience that you have, whether it's an internal, emotional, or thought or physical sensation type of experience, or it's an experience with others, right? If you can build the skill to see the impermanence and the presence of every experience, then that leaves room for you to feel the empathy for others. And that, my friends, is a very, very deeply important skill, the empathy, right? It's one of the main things with emotional intelligence, right? And it's also going to contribute to your well-being, right? And that's the whole point here, right? That we want to be well. And ultimately, right, ultimately, if you can feel that connection for someone, right, because remember those concept, the constituents of well-being, right? One of them is altruism and generosity, right? And so if you can feel if you can empathically feel another person's pain, then what you can do is you can offer that support. And that is a fantastic way to practice and to cultivate generosity and altruism for yourself. And that is one of the main pillars of our well-being. Okay, so again, it's not just about me, or I should say that making it not about me brings it back to me and makes me happy and healthy, right? So it's all, and that's where it becomes a very cyclical thing, right? Like it's not you, it's not me, it's both of us. It's us and it's me, right? Like Dr. Dan Siegel calls it, we, right? There's you, there's me, and then there's this we, right? Like I know where I'm at, I know what's happening with me, but I also, if in order for me to be healthy and of mind and psychology and stuff, and to be able to really have a fulfilling experience here, I need to feel you as well. And so one of the things that prevents me from feeling you is to become more too identified with my own experience and my own emotions, my own difficulties, on and on and on and on. I hope you found that helpful today. Okay, it wasn't the original thing I was going to talk about today, and yes, my wife and I had that huge discussion this morning, and it really kind of made me think, okay, empathy. Let me talk about empathy today. So I hope you found it beneficial, and if you did, let me know. Okay, I love to hear from people, so let me know. Just shoot me an email, tell me how you think of it, or what have you. If something doesn't make sense to you, if you need more clarification on something, or you need some assistance on getting there with this, then please reach out to me. Okay, please. It doesn't cost you anything to reach out, okay? I promise. And I'll even give you, I am one of these people tell me all the time that I give too much. So please trust that I will give you plenty of value, even before there is an actual exchange happening between you and me, okay? And by all means, no matter what, please do the YouTube things and do the podcast things. The YouTube things are the share, the like, the subscribe, the comment. Do all those things if you can. And on the podcast things, it would be rate and review. Okay, these things help to get the algorithm to put this in front of more people. And if I'm in front of more people, that means there's more people that are going to benefit from this. And remember, that is an act on your part of altruism. So that will make you healthier too. and lastly, if you're enjoying these videos a lot and you want to support me, if you're not in a place where you want an actual coach and a coaching experience, but you would like to support me, I do have a Patreon page, which I would more than happily take you in as a patron, and I would love that. I'd be very, very grateful. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. I wish you well, and I'll be back again tomorrow. I hope you all have a great day, and I hope you're able to, again, practice presence, acceptance, compassion, curiosity. If you can do those things, then everything else will fall into place. All this stuff that I talk about, if you can just practice presence, being really right here, right now, and seeing things as just passing through this present moment, accepting the things as they are, letting compassion drive your heart, right? Like letting compassion be your kind of, the driving force behind you, and to greet everything with an open curiosity, then you'll have no problems, okay? But again, this all happens through practice. And if you'd like to know about those practices, I'm here for you. Thanks very much again. I wish you well. I'll be back again tomorrow. Take care.